Hey, welcome to State of the Hack Black Hat Edition. I'm Nick Carr from the Advanced Practices team.
I'm Christopher Glyer, Chief Security Architect.
And we're here with Matt Graeber from SpecterOps.
Hey.
So we just wanted to get some of the people that we think super highly of that are doing really cool work and get you in here and talk, have people get to know you. A lot of times we talk about how people got into their role and how you got to where you're at.
Yeah.
Like what's your background? Like how'd you get into the field? And
Sure. Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm always fascinated by everyone's story about how they got into it because, like, there is no standard path to get into InfoSec, and everyone comes in with a unique experience, and where they come from, definitely dictates that. For me, my first job, or like my first career, I would say I was a rock climbing instructor when we were living out in Maryland. So I did that for maybe like 5 or 6 years. That was a lot of fun. Eventually realized like I need to get a little more serious with my life. I still didn't really know what to do. I started college, but then I also met a lot of people when I was climbing. They were in the military. They were at various government agencies trying to convince me to join the military. So I was always interested in languages. So for me, I ended up joining the Navy. Only reason I didn't join the Army was because the recruiter was out to lunch that day. So Navy recruiter came up. Sure enough, the rest was history. I was a Mandarin Chinese linguist for 6 years. So nothing like super computer related per se, but as I was going along, I met a lot of people like in the government space who were doing computer related stuff, both on like the offensive and defensive side. So I was really fascinated by that. So actually, like I specifically remember like one of my like side duties when I wasn't doing linguistic stuff was I was like on the auxiliary security forces. So I was like, for better or for worse, I was like the first line of defense for this little military installation that I was at. And I would always notice when various people would come in, and like sometimes they'd have like their government blue badges with like their DEF CON lanyards on it and stuff. And so like I knew I had no experience in InfoSec, but I knew like I was really interested in that. And so I saw enough people and started to get into those circles and realized that like there's some really, really sexy opportunities here. So military didn't really pan out for me. Like I didn't want to be deployed all over the world for the rest of my life. So I studied as much as I could, finished up my CS degree while I was in the military, and thankfully the military paid for all that for me.
That's
so
nice.
Not having student debt is a nice thing. Finished that up, got a few certs, and then lucky enough for me, I had enough drive and interest that I convinced the people I interviewed with to, you guys probably know like Chris Campbell, ObscureSec on Twitter, and various other guys on that team. Sure enough, my first InfoSec job was on the Army Red Team as a contractor.
Oh, sweet.
So it was
you Jedi mind tricked your way through.
Yeah, exactly. Fake it till you make it. So had a lot of great experiences there. Just cut my teeth in InfoSec. That job, working with great people like Chris, Skip Duckwall, passing the hash on Twitter. So really great people. Eventually just wanted to spread my wings, got into more of like the offensive side of things for a little bit. And so that's where like I really learned to reverse engineer. And then like eventually I wanted to transition from what I was doing to full-time malware analysis. So I actually picked up Sicko's, Mike Sikorsky's
Practical Malware
Analysis book. Read it front to back, did all the labs, and also at the time, like when I was on the Army Red Team, like that's when I really started to pick up PowerShell. Because like at the time, like nothing was detecting it.
Was this like PowerShell 1.0 days or like?
Yeah, so like very early PowerShell days. Like so, a little sidetrack. So the very first PowerShell script that I wrote was a shellcode runner because like there was this silly little executable called Syringe that we were running that would take a shellcode payload as like a hex string, cast it to a byte array, and then like create remote thread on that, right? So we were getting caught with that. Saw Dave Kennedy's DEF CON talk way back when, PowerShell OMFG. That was like the lights went off in my head, and that's when I realized like there's very little that you can't do in PowerShell, and no one's detecting this stuff. So I wrote my first shellcode runner. Anyway, going back to the RE stuff, as I was going through Sicko's book, there was a section on process hollowing. And so the lab had like a 32-bit sample, and so like I was still kind of learning and getting comfortable with like the Win32 API and stuff in PowerShell. And so I wanted to do a 64-bit variant of that malware, implementing that in PowerShell.
Okay.
So like I was able to, I figured that out eventually, like wrote one of my early blog posts on the subject. Sure enough, later on, I think Sicko had tweeted out that what was it? Was it M Labs at the time?
Yeah, it was M Labs. Yeah,
Yeah. So M Labs was hiring. This is the precursor to Flare. Ended up interviewing with them.
Yep.
With like Steve Davis and I forget who else was there, but Sicko was there.
Nick Harbor, maybe. Or?
He wasn't. No, he wasn't there
Okay.
at the time. Yeah. But anyway, so got a job at FireEye on the Flare team. This was like right after the acquisition.
Yep.
And it was a blast, man. Like Sicko was a really amazing boss, and I learned so much and like working with people. So like I was in the Alexandria office with you guys.
That's right. Yep.
I'm out in Seattle now, but I got to work with people like Willie, like Claudio, like everyone on the team really was just amazing. So
Willie Valentin and Claudio Terescu. So
yep. Working with you guys, like on the early like APT 29 stuff was a blast.
We worked pretty closely on all the WMI stuff and APT 29 pretty heavily.
It turned out to be a real good thing that you knew so much about PowerShell exploitation, because every sample was like, this is really cool. What does this do? Like
we had to very much stumble our way through kind of jointly as like, I have no idea what this is doing, and like kind of can you do a little bit of research and help me out? So it's shows like a lot of times how so much of these things are like big team efforts between people with kind of disparate skill sets and
totally
to come up with the end outcome or result.
Yep. Yeah, and like at the time I had a little bit of background in WMI. Like I had already written some like PowerShell persistence code to like abstract that whole process away. So when like you guys approached me with the really cool stuff that APT 29 was doing, that was a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, that you worked on that white paper, right? With WMI.
Well, we had a Black Hat talk 3 years ago, I think.
Long story there. I don't know if everybody knows.
Yeah, but that was so awesome to like drive from like just seeing how you were able to take your analysis one-off triage, help us understand it, to work with the team to build a way to go out and collect it and then
find it at scale. Semi-manually, but
right.
That iterative process was cool. It's so awesome to get people way smarter than us and deep in these areas to assist.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So like one thing that you reminded me of when we did the research like for Black Hat and like Willie, myself and Claudio, like we did the gamut of talks. I think it was in 2015 at like B-Sides LV, Black Hat and DevCon. And this came up recently. It was kind of funny. One of the defensive recommendations that I had for PowerShell was like, so with WMI persistence, you can actually, like as a defender, you can use WMI persistence to detect WMI persistence.
Right.
So like, yo dog, I heard you like WMI persistence. Going back to it, like just a week ago, I realized like with the talk that I just gave with Lee Christensen on Subverting Sysmon, realized because there was a WMI component in our talk, it turns out that like that defensive recommendation back in the day was actually not entirely robust. So although that's bad, that's actually like really validating for me, because like you guys are involved in like detection engineering quite a bit, so like you understand that like you write a detection for something, you feel as though it's robust at the time, but like it doesn't stop there, right? There's always going to be variants of attacks for particular TTPs. So it's cool that we're among good company here, that we're always thinking about like ways to constantly improve our detections.
Step your game up. So what was the talk that you just gave here at Black Hat? What was the you said Subverting Sysmon? If you give maybe a 30-second overview of like, obviously it's a pretty long talk and white paper next week, but
So we gave Lee Christensen and myself, Tifkin is Lee's handle online, gave a talk called Subverting Sysmon, but really what we wanted to do was just use Sysmon as a case study for putting forth a more like formalized methodology for when like our team would do an assessment against any given security product. So we got that out there. Sysmon was chosen. One, it's free utility.
Yeah.
A lot of people use it though. Like a lot of our customers, we see that in their environments all the time. I mean, we tend to like work with a lot of more mature customers, like defensively. So like, you know, they tend to like to roll things their own. So like Sysmon is great. Like, you know, we didn't want to, you know, say anything like bad per se about Sysmon, because like it is actually a really great tool for supplementing data collection.
Yeah.
So we actually saw a threat actor recently install Sysmon on a system because they wanted to troubleshoot something. And I was like,
Hey,
well, everybody uses it.
That speaks volumes to the efficacy of it. Yeah.
It's decent protection too, because there's a lot of guardrailing that looks for if like Sysmon's running, because they're assuming then there's some visibility to what they're doing. So you'll see process checks for it. It's like,
or that they may be running in like a VM that has Sysmon to generate the events, right?
Yeah. So like what we see is that, you know, conferences like this and DEF CON, there's a huge focus on like auditing the attack surface of, you know, any product and finding like exploitable vulnerabilities. So of course, like we would be looking at those things as well, but what we found that people generally aren't talking so much about is for any given product, what are the evasion and tampering opportunities with that given product. So like we covered that for Sysmon. For example, like from the tampering side, it's pretty robust and like it's fairly secure against non-admins.
Yep.
Once you're an admin, like all bets are off.
I mean, with most products, I would say that's probably the case, just because you can do anything at that point.
And that's totally reasonable too. But like we still like to acknowledge that like the course of action that you take as a non-admin is just a different course of action from when you do eventually escalate and you have just additional you know, capabilities and options available to you. So yeah, like from the tampering side, one of the case studies that we covered was WMI tradecraft. So like WMI persistence, relatively popular amongst attackers, it seems. It is, well, until like our talk, we realized that it was inherently bound by like a specific namespace. So you guys know like WMI persistence, there's these event consumers, like active event consumer, command line event consumer to execute your payload. They're bound by namespaces like root subscription or root default. Well, and again, like my recommendation at the time was, just alert whenever persistence was done in any of those specific namespaces. Right. So I had the idea, didn't know if it was possible, but it turns out you can perform WMI persistence in any arbitrary namespace.
Okay.
Me and other people on my team, like we're huge on wanting to make sure that we put out good detections for like new tradecraft that we put out, and this was no exception. So it turns out in Windows 10, there's a fantastic event log entry that will capture WMI persistence regardless of the namespace.
Okay, that's great.
So, and it also kind of helped drive the point home that Sysmon is just one data source. Yep. It composes many data sources in this one product. But obviously you want to supplement your detections with other data sources as well. And
I saw that you were in a pretty awesome romper.
Yeah.
You want to tell the backstory on like how you got conned or pushed into doing that?
So it was all in good fun. What happened was there was some thread between me, Nate Warfield, and Barry Dorns, both at Microsoft. Yep. So Nate is at MSRC, Barry is on the .NET team, so he's like their security POC for like everything. I don't know how it started, but like we were talking about the talk, and it eventually escalated to, I think Barry mentioned like, oh man, wouldn't it be awesome if you wore a romper on stage? And then I think Nate came around and was like, hey, how about a tuxedo romper? Like that'd be nice and classy, right? So I disregarded that for a minute. Then I thought to myself, So like initially I was like, what if I suggested that I will wear one of those things, but I'll only do it for charity?
Right.
And so like I had the idea, and then I had to take like 10 minutes to actually think about the implications of that.
Do I really want to be in a tuxedo romper?
And then start thinking about like what crazy number I would put out there.
Sure. That it would never get hit.
Yeah.
Right.
So I came up with $4,000 that, if that could be reached by the time of Black Hat, I'd be down with that. I checked with my wife, made sure she was okay with me looking completely ridiculous in public. She was like, "Oh yeah, go for it. It's for a good cause." I put it out there. Sure enough, Barry just rolled with it.
Yep.
Started the campaign, and we broke it within the 4,000.
Right. And what was the charity that you chose?
So the charity was the Muscular Dystrophy Association.
Nice.
So we have a coworker. He's had family members who have been affected by that. So
That's great.
it's really important to us. It's near and dear to us. So as much as we can raise for that, we.
So you hit your target. You hit your target before Black Hat,
and then
right?
some,
like,
right?
Real quick.
And then some. So we hit our target really quickly. But then, I had a co-presenter, Lee. I reached out, people were hoping that he would also be on stage wearing a romper. So Lee eventually chimed in and was like, "Yeah, I'm totally down if you can raise 6,000 for it." We didn't think that we were going to hit it. We were kind of stuck at like 4,500 until Skip Duckwall came along and was like, I will shell out this money to make you look ridiculous. The only thing was Skip dictated what romper that Lee would wear.
Nice.
Fortunately, like from my perspective, I didn't have it so bad because I think I actually didn't look too bad.
Pulled off a tuxedo.
Yeah. Lee's romper was pretty ridiculous, so it wasn't quite as bad for me. But yeah, I'm not the type who typically begs for attention like that. But I'll do.
It's all for a good cause.
I'll do almost anything within reason for a good cause.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
So I love the way you gave an awesome keynote at DerbyCon that kind of encapsulates your mindset. I encourage anyone to watch it if you haven't seen it. Like just encouraging curiosity and like challenging assumptions.
Yeah. DerbyCon 2017.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. DerbyCon 2017. Yeah. So, and obviously in this case, it's it was doing the same thing with Sysmon, like questioning the data sources and seeing how you can get around it. So I was just curious if there's other things that you're exploring. I know you've recently said that PowerShell. Are you guys moving away from PowerShell? Have you written your last PowerShell script?
I wouldn't say we're done with PowerShell. More specifically, I'd say we are diversifying our offensive portfolio.
Okay.
So Will Schroeder Harmjoy recently put out a post and developed a bunch of C# based tools he called the repository Ghost Pack. So a lot of our operations are starting to focus on like C# and .NET tradecraft. That wasn't chosen at random. We try to always be thinking about like what the next thing will be from an offensive perspective. So like how do we define what that next thing will be? Generally,
how'd you guys choose that over something like say like I don't know VB script or some random other scripting language that doesn't have the same level of visibility from a logging perspective?
So it's the combination of both the flexibility of the .NET framework and the fact that there is practically no security optics in it currently.
Yep.
So that'll be our focus for a while until
other people kind of step
hopefully
up
there are like mitigations and security optics.
Sure.
In which case, you'll
find the next thing.
We'll go scattering and diversify our portfolio again. And you know what? We totally embrace that. Like I mentioned like during our Sysmon talk that one of the things that is like a great point of pride is like actually burning tradecraft, like spending significant resources finding new like evasive techniques and then putting it out there for the public and vendors to build detections off of. And ideally, one of the things that I push for internally pretty hard is like if you're going to put a new technique out there, try to spend at least as much time researching the detection side of things because who better than to build robust detections than the person who's actually developing the evasive technique, like assuming they have that skill set and like they've worked with like enterprises and data like at scale, like building detections.
So when you're coming up with like a new say research idea, or like walk us through a little bit of your process of like either what tools do you use, or like how do you start with like a hypothesis or and then take that all the way through testing to get to an end result?
Sure. I think that my general workflow would be like I would identify something that I'm interested in, and I'm really driven by things that aren't necessarily new, like they could be really old, but just things that just aren't talked about that much.
Sure.
I like to explore the unknown, and so like some of the older stuff that I was interested in was like WMI,
Yep.
tradecraft. But then like I've harped on like application whitelisting and like device guard for a while.
Yep.
So my general workflow is like I identify something I'm interested in, go as deep technically as I can, and explore all the possibilities. And I can't achieve that without proper tooling. So that would be the first step of really any endeavor that I go on, is if there's not existing tooling out there, then I need to build it. And that's generally how I learn anyway. It's like, for example, I'm pretty comfortable with like the P file format, but I wouldn't have been really comfortable with it if I didn't write a P file format parser at the day to like, you know, discover all the nuances in the file format, fail at writing proper code many times. And that's another thing that I mentioned during my keynote last year, is that like, you know, people really should embrace failure. Because like, to me, like, what better way to learn than by constantly failing?
Sure.
You know, you're not always going to succeed at things, and when you do fail, it's going to give you a new perspective and motivate you to go a different direction. And especially when like you work with other team members who are really passionate and also embrace failure, like you can ping your ideas off of them, they can tell you how stupid you're being, which I appreciate deeply. So I would say that. So I guess the last thing would be, after I've gone deep enough into any given technology, I like to eventually resurface and think to myself, like, okay, what are the actual implications of this thing that I'm trying to learn? So like application whitelisting, I learned eventually is it's actually kind of hard to do at scale. Yeah, well, anyone could have told me that, but I like to
find it out yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So, but when I like came back up to the surface after diving in so deep with that stuff, I had never really asked myself, like, okay, application whitelisting, ultimately, like, this just comes down to trust. What is trust? I haven't heard a ton of people like actually consider that or talk about it. There's actually a great Troopers keynote from several years ago on the topic. And so I actually just got back from lunch with Eno at ERNW, and we had a great conversation at Troopers last year about trust. And so like I'm fascinated by that. So like I'll go super deep into something technical, and then when I come back to the surface, like I really like thinking about stuff at more of like a strategic level. And it serves as sort of like a check on myself. It's like, you know, am I focusing my resources properly? And, you know, if I'm confident that, you know, something that I've researched is actually useful from a strategic perspective, then I can talk about it ad nauseum until I identify that next thing that strikes my fancy. So awesome.
Nice. Thanks for giving insight into your process. And if you haven't seen the previous talk, and I guess this one will be online at some point.
Yeah. We got a white paper too that'll probably come out in like a week as well. Like 40-page white paper, just detailing our methodology for assessing like primarily endpoint security products.
That's great. You and the whole SpecterOps team and all the stuff you guys are putting out, like the burning tradecraft is always fun to learn and see what you guys are doing, and makes me excited to think of the stuff you haven't released yet. But just the process of where, like, if you found something really cool, taking the time, like I know it takes so much time to actually get it in a format where people can digest it, write a white paper, blog. Like I keep stumbling on your stuff or your comments on other people's things, like when you're researching a topic or a technique. It's really encouraging to see how valuable that is.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I mean, I definitely appreciate like the reciprocal relationship we've had. So it's like I really appreciate vendors where like we can like proactively share our research, and then like you'll give us some like threat intel related stuff back. So it's very much appreciated.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Cheers.
Right, thanks, man. Cheers.